Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 226 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the Second Amendment podcast. There's a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd is the greatest hostess in the entire universe. Oh my God, she is a big deal. Aaron Millett! Aaron, how big of a deal are you?
Well, not to brag, but last week I actually did the second oral history I've done in my life. And I was very honored to do the first one, and I was really surprised to be asked to do a second one. So it's kind of a weird flex, but I don't know how many people have been recorded not once, but twice for history.
Well, there.
This is where you express curiosity about what it's about.
Hmm?
You can't understand me when I'm whispering.
I just barely.
I was saying, this is the point where you express curiosity as to what I was being interviewed about.
Yeah, what was the history? Well, you spoke oral history as if there I was supposed to know, but I don't know, Aaron. Help me, I'm confused. I'm lost in the woods.
So, all right, rather than explain, I'm just going to read the email, because that'll explain everything. And this was from Dr. Kit Heinzman out of, well, a couple of universities. And it goes, Dear Ms. Paulette, I'm reaching out as a historian in the hopes that you'll consider letting me conduct an oral history interview with you about your unique experiences of the pandemic. We know that the pandemic has been heavily politicized, and I'd love to have the chance to speak with you about your own experiences of this historic moment so that historians of the future can tell the true history. Right now, I'm curating a collection of interviews from Second Amendment rights activists, and I deeply believe that you have an important voice in this conversation. To date, I've conducted 100-plus interviews that are then archived through a collaboration between Arizona State University and Indiana Purdue. I do this work so that historians of the future have a more personal and nuanced understanding of life during COVID-19, and so that underrepresented voices, too often marginalized in universities, are preserved and heard. And so, oral history is you get the historian who starts recording, and they ask you questions, and they let you talk. And there's, okay, well, I can't really say there's no such thing as a time limit, because eventually people have to go home or go to bed, but they are very, very forgiving. And so I wouldn't really call myself a people pleaser, but I do like to do tasks properly. I like to, I take pride in my work. And so when someone asks me a question and I give them an answer that is long and involved because it's a complicated topic, I will then frequently ask if I have answered their question, because I worry, did I get too technical? Did I wander off into the weeds? Did I forget an important point? And I was frequently told by Dr. Heinzman, it's like, everything you say is fine. As long as you are telling me the truth about your experiences, there's no wrong answer. And I'm just like, that.
So there I was, locked out of in the pandemic with Morgan Fairchild, who was my wife at the time.
And so we talked, well, I did most of the talking for about 2.5 hours. And yeah, and the other oral history I did was, I want to say 2019. It was through, the Floridians listening are going to hate me because it was either UF or UCF. I don't remember which. I'm sorry. They were doing an oral history, I believe, I'm not 100% certain, on people involved with Pulse. And I was involved with that peripherally. And so I recorded, I don't know how many hours that took me. So that one at least I understood. This one, I didn't really understand why. And one of the questions I asked through the email exchange is, well, why me? You said that I had an important voice, but I don't get it. And so I asked about that. And Dr. Heinzman says, as you can imagine, I get the why me question a lot. Chance plays a big role. Because of the legislative changes happening around gun laws, I got curious about Second Amendment activists, and so started crawling through corners of the internet I don't often venture into, and stumbled into. And, and I'm skimming here. It's entirely possible we won't end up talking about guns very much, or even at all. I don't prepare special questions for interviewees based on the search terms that brought me to them. My default questions focus on the experiential side of life during the pandemic and are the same for you as they are for anyone else. And so the short version is that Dr. Heinzman was just looking around and so found pink pistols, and I have an easy-to-find email address, and that's how I was asked. So there you go.
She followed the beacon to big deal. Big effing deal. And look it up under the dictionary, and there's a picture of Aaron Paulette. Under a parasol, nonetheless.
Why, thank you. So, apparently I'm going to be annoying historians in the future. Go me. One of the things that's interesting is that the link to the archive is literally called Journal of the Plague Year. So, well, I thought it was funny because I believe that's a reference to an Umberto Eco novel.
Okay, you've lost me there. I'm clearly not cultured enough.
I was wrong. Journal of the Plague Year is a book by Daniel Defoe. I am confusing that with Umberto Eco's Love in the Time of Cholera. That's why. Because a lot of people made references to Love in the Time of COVID. Yeah, this is an association which will only make sense to me and a few others. I'm being a literature nerd now. Never mind. I feel like I have babbled long enough. How are you doing, Weer'd?
I am doing all right. I am back from Maine, where we had Thanksgiving and the family was all together, and it was we had a great time, and it was a good break from just the norms. And so we had Thanksgiving, and then when we came back, our friend said, we have a fridge full of leftovers. You guys want to come over and help? I'm like, well, okay. So we had Thanksgiving and essentially Friendsgiving, and they have a daughter that's about my daughter's age, and the two of them were just having the greatest of times, and they are both extremely loud human beings. We were just like sitting there listening to the cacophony, and I'm just like, he's just like, oh my God, she gets so loud when they're together. I'm like, mine's always this loud. She goes, I think they're combinative. And I'm like, yeah, no, all I care about is they're having fun, so she's not bored. When my daughter is bored, she starts makes really, really bad life choices.
Your daughter, loud and rambunctious?
Yes.
The hell you say, sir?
I know, isn't it strange? Well, my wife is extremely quiet, so it could have gone either way. But I do joke about saying that I may be the only man in this house, but you're the only quiet one. The both of us do it's too quiet. Put some music on. Father, can we listen to White Zombie? Yes, we can, child. Let's turn it up loud. How was your Thanksgiving, by the way?
It was low-key in a very good way. And we had a much smaller turkey, and it's all gone. We've got all the sides left over, except for the cranberry dressing in a can. I've eaten all of that. But we've still got the gravy and the stuffing and all the other sides, and all the turkey's gone. And usually I'm sick of it, but at this point I feel kind of cheated because Mom got a much smaller turkey, because usually she gets like a 20 plus pound, because it's 3 adults and 2 dogs, and gets a real big one, and usually we're eating that until the first week or two of December, and I'm sick of it. And then Mom would make another one for Christmas, and it would be just like, I'm so done with turkey. But she got a much smaller one. I want to say like about a 13-pound one. And it was literally eaten. Yeah, I finished it off on Saturday. And it was just like, I didn't get enough turkey. I want more.
Well, the cool thing is that now that it's after Thanksgiving, all the turkeys that didn't sell, they go on super sale.
Yeah.
My dad actually came home on, it was either Friday or Saturday with a turkey that he had gotten marked down. And I just was scrolling up in chat because on Thanksgiving Day you sent a photograph of the seductive photo of your jellied cranberry sauce.
Yes.
I was almost but not quite disappointed that we actually had some like high zoot cranberry business that was served in a bowl instead of the jellied cranberry sauce, so I could not send you my jellied cranberry reclined. For those that aren't getting the full picture of the mind, is the you shake the cranberry sauce out of the can and then you slice it and then you just kind of spread it out like a like a blackjack dealer starting a wash.
Ribbed for our flavor.
Yes. Oh, I do like a good jelly cranberry sauce. Oh, and I didn't get any left over. I was tempted to ask, but I think my mom had plans and she didn't offer. But I would have loved to have gotten some leftover turkey because I'm kind of craving Chef John from foodwishes.com. He does a turkey tamale pie where essentially you put the turkey in like a Mexican style tomato sauce, and then you essentially spoon cranberry on the brain, cornbread mix over the top, and then sprinkle it with cheese and bake it. And so
one of the things our family likes to do with the leftovers is to make turkey lasagna.
Oh hell yeah. Oh hell yeah! I clearly we are both firmly in the turkey. Turkey is an excellent form of meat.
Oh yeah,
because Oddball was just talking about the fact that he at his Thanksgiving he showed up with a ham because he's like, yeah, we can heat up this ham because I don't want any turkey.
That boy ain't right.
No. And I will say, much to my dad's joy. But my mom was like, all right, the turkey's ready. And then I told my father, come out here and carve the turkey. And I'm like, no, I'll do it. I watched Dad carve the turkey last year. I don't want to see it happen again. Please, the turkey must be carved by someone who's taken some comparative anatomy courses.
So either there's a story that you're not telling, or this is a reference that I've forgotten or maybe never heard.
No.
I mean, I guess by context he did a bad job, but that's not very entertaining.
Yeah, no, Dad just kind of was just cutting the turkey how he felt the turkey needed to be cut, not how the turkey and he agreed on how to cut it. When you are either carving or butchering any animal, there is a certain flow that you're following with, and he
was cutting against the grain. Is that what you're saying?
He was cutting against the grain. He was just kind of, when he would get to a bone, he would just kind of chop away instead of locating the joint and dislocating the joint. And it just as someone who's taken a lot of anatomy courses and knows surgery, and also I rather enjoy buying a large animal and breaking it down. Is it's just one of those, no, you're doing it wrong. My dad was like, good, I don't have to do it. And I did not get the compliment. I always heard that my great-grandfather was just a jack of all trades. He was a car dealer, was his primary business, but he was also an avid woodworker, and he was also the dude in town that you would swing by after you bagged your deer, and he would butcher the deer for you. Actually, my dad's father also, he ran the local grocery store, and they would get sides of beef and he would break them down. But my mom always said when my grandfather carved the turkey, she says it always tasted better. And I was hoping for that compliment, but it didn't happen. I just got this is a much better job. Yes, it is. Oh, well, we have, I think we've rambled long enough. I think it is time to dive into the news. And this first one was this one really, really amused me, and I think you read this story as well, didn't you? The Rethinking Run Hide fight in the Atlantic.
Yeah, that's the thing. It wasn't so much the topic as it was the Atlantic, which is, in my experience, rather to very hard left.
Mm-hmm.
And you're the one who found the article. I'll let you talk about it. But it was really, I'm reading this and I'm going, really? Okay, this is surprising. And maybe if we've, actually, we haven't done anything, but if the Atlantic is starting to agree with us, then maybe there's progress to be made. So yes, Weer'd, tell me, how does this particular Atlantic article suggest we should rethink Run, Hide, Fight? So the writer of this article, and it's Juliet Kayyem, and she does the usual talking about how this is related to Club Q, and how previously the thought of Run, Hide, Fight was all very good and virtuous. And then she started talking about how, first of all, there have been failures in Run, Hide, Fight, and in fact, there is an increasing amount of proof that fighting back immediately, even if you fail, it does more good than running and hiding, because you can be shot while you run and you can be shot where you're found. And she actually lists 2 people who died during shootings. Riley Howell, who died during the North Carolina shooting in 2019, as he charged the suspect and successfully ended the incident, even though he died. And then Kendrick Castillo, killed in Colorado while lunging at a shooter, allowing for other classmates to exit the room. And then, practically with clenched teeth, she mentions Eli Dicken, and we all know what he did.
The Dicken drill.
Yes, and I have to say with clenched teeth, because her last sentence on the topic is, Dicken's actions in particular reignited a debate about responsible gun ownership and added to the thorny conversation about, quote, a good guy with a gun, unquote. And so talking about how Club Q and the hero Richard Fierro, who we talked about last week, used a drag handle in combat, which we've never seen before, and halted it.
And may I interrupt on the,
Mm-hmm.
in the meantime, there won't be in the show notes, but you guys could search it out. The booking photo of the killer at Club Q. I normally don't draw attention to the killers at this, but this booking photo should be bringing there, because he beat like 5 shades of crap out of this guy. Like,
oh, he got tuned up.
Yeah, this guy looked like a wet piece of bread.
One of the stories which I've heard, and I haven't corroborated, is that while the shooter was being pacified, i.e. Major Fierro was pistol whipping him, someone else, who was one of the drag performers, walked out and kicked the guy in the face. And I can just imagine that, being kicked with a delicate high heel.
Or just a crazy stiletto, but
could be that too.
And let's be honest, drag queens, they don't miss leg day.
No, they don't. And so here's another statement. It's the last paragraph of this article, and again, it's very grudging. And it says, I'm not ready to say I want my young kids to fight if, God forbid, they encounter a mass shooter, but I'm willing to admit that maybe I want someone present to fight for them. I don't love it. I don't even like it. In fact, I hate it. And, well, okay. She's entitled to her feelings. I just like the fact that there are the usual suspects who are now beginning to admit, however grudgingly, that, yeah, fighting back is the thing to do. This is what you do to short-circuit a spree shooter. And if we can just get this into public consciousness, so much the better. And what with the Atlantic readership being, I presume, to be moderate to hard left, this is exactly the demographic that needs to hear this and needs to consider it.
Yeah, and it's also rumblings in the thing that I have always seen, which is the Second Amendment is not even bipartisan. It is beyond partisan. It is simply, no matter what your position is, with the exception of being anti-gun and or extreme pacifist, do whatever you want to me, and the whatever higher power or karma, dharma, whatever is will take care of me. With those minor exceptions, the Second Amendment really covers everybody's view of the world, and this just covers it as well. Again, my wife one time stumbled upon me and realized that I was talking to someone that she knew was extremely left-wing and heard me talking about Assorted Caliber's podcast with them. She's like, "Oh, what do you think about that?" And I'm like, honestly speaking, that's the whole point of ACP is I specifically want it to be every walk of politics to come across this show and go, "Oh, this is an interesting podcast. I am enjoying this." Because again, no matter what your political beliefs are, if you are, yes, the standard issue, red-blooded shall not be infringed person, yeah, we get it. You support the Second Amendment. But also, if you are the socialist revolutionary, Karl Marx was very much in favor of the people owning guns. And it doesn't matter. If you are the oppressed minority, there's one way to fight against oppression. If you are the drag queen dancing in the gay club, you probably aren't going to be carrying a gun in that outfit, but it's a good idea to have some friends nearby who are kitted out. It's just a universal thing. There are bad people in this world, and if you can shoot them and or beat the living tar out of them, that's really the best solution, because all the other options of just call the cops. The cops showed up to this event very, very, very quickly. And by the time they got there, the shooter was down and was not going to be a problem to anybody. And they just needed to get an ambulance for him. And so, yeah, I'm very, very glad to see again that this is permeating into, into medias that were before quite hostile to it. And again, yes, she has that hostility. Again, her bit about the good guy with the gun. And, begrudgingly admitted that yes, Eli Dickon shot this guy who was attempting to kill a bunch of people, and he would have totally been a national news spree killer, et cetera, if not for the fact that he got filled full of bullets. So I am very, very glad to see this, and I'm also glad to see because it helps everyone in the fight back. If you don't have a gun, if you don't have a tool to fight back, well, you fight with what you got. But you could very well be dead the moment a spree killing starts happening. And so it may not be the best solution for you, though in many instances it can be. But the one thing that's going to stop this is going to be people not just cowering and waiting to be shot. And these shooters are by nature universally cowards. These are not brave people. Brave people do not get in. Brave people seek out a fair fight, and they don't go and massacre strangers. These are cowards. These are people that want an advantage, and they want to dominate. And if you don't let them be dominated, it really, really messes with them. And evidence shows that it absolutely screws up their plan. So I was very, very pleased by this article.
I still remember, and by remember, I mean it'll occasionally pop up in my memories and annoy the hell out of me. So in 2018, a church in my county was holding a Run, Hide, Fight seminar.
Mm-hmm.
And I attended because I had never attended one of those. And I was carrying because I'm licensed and you can carry in church, and it wasn't posted. And I was there for a chunk of it, and I think we had like an intermission in order to get refreshments, or maybe I went up to use the bathroom. I don't remember, but apparently someone saw the bulge because I was carrying, inside the waist, and then I had my my t-shirt over it. But somehow they figured out that I was carrying, and so I believe the pastor of the church had breathlessly gone over and it didn't even have the guts to ask me to leave. No, instead told one of the deputies who was giving the presentation, one of the deputies who was armed, I would like to add, and had the deputy tell me I needed to leave because I made people uncomfortable. So, I mean, it was okay that the deputies were armed, but it wasn't okay that I was armed at a seminar where people were talking about what to do if a spree killer came in and started killing, and you had to fight back. That really, it just what's wrong with you? What?
There is this strange mindset. I mean, Tam Keel of various gun publications had a great line where she referred to as homo cubiculus. There's the caveman, and then there's the cubicle dweller, and as essentially the toothless Eloi human being that we are becoming, especially in urban areas. And I remember, like, I've always got a pocket knife on me, and it's very clearly there. And the reason why I have a pocket knife on me is because pocket knives are insanely useful. And so my pocket knife is always coming out of my pocket and being used. And so it becomes very, very quick that people realize that, hey, that bearded dude has a pocket knife on him. And I remember at one point, I was actually the company I was working for. I was also in charge of delivering lab supplies to the different labs, and so I had the shipment came in, and I had a big cart of lab supplies, and I was bringing them in, and I gave a package to somebody, and they said, "Oh, hey, could you open this with your knife?" I said, "Sure." Pulled out my knife, flicked open the blade, and when the blade flicked open, they cringed. And then I cut open the package, and then I handed it back to them. And as they were taking the stuff out of the package and I was putting my knife back, they said, "Why do you always carry a knife?"
Because you might ask me to open things.
Yes, that's just not a logical question. If you're and this is not the first time this person has asked me to open something for them. If you're constantly asking other people to open stuff for you, maybe this fairly inexpensive tool that is very light and easy to carry around with you, maybe, just maybe you should carry one of these.
So I was living in Washington, D.C. from like 99 to 2005. And I want to say this was around 2000. And I, through a temp agency, had gotten a job doing data entry. And I had clipped to my backpack a folding knife, and the knife itself was only about 2.5, maybe 3 inches long at most, the blade itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so it had a carabiner clip, and I just clipped it onto my bag. And I'm there, and I'm ready to be given the orientation by the HR drone. And she doesn't give the full screeching like a vampire confronted with a crucifix, but it's like, what is that? It's a pocket knife. Why do you have it? In case I need to open things? You know, I had never thought of it as a weapon. It was a tool. Mm-hmm. And in hindsight, I'm honestly surprised that I wasn't just immediately, sent home. That was it. Don't ever come back. But I guess maybe my utter just confusion. It's like, it's a tool. It never occurred to me that someone could freak out thinking it was a weapon. And so she asked in that way that I knew it wasn't a request, that I should clip it off and put it in the bag and then never bring it to work again. And I complied, and then when she wasn't looking, I rolled my eyes so hard I saw my brain.
Well, it's probably also one of those, especially being HR, she probably quickly did the math and realized that, we actually can't terminate you for what is clearly and legally not a weapon, especially the 3 inches, depending on, where you are and what's going on, what constitutes when a knife is no longer a tool, because people agree. Like, even in England, you are allowed to have a pocket knife. I'm actually, you may not be able to even have like a Swiss Army Victronox on your, in your pocket, but overall, the idea of you're allowed to bring a very, very small non-locking knife on airplanes and things like that is at least, I don't even know which jurisdictions allow it and don't allow it, but essentially there are kosher knives very similar to the double-barreled shotgun and the bolt-action hunting rifle are almost always the universal. No, these are actually cool guns that you can have when anti-gunners are talking about it, because they'll eventually get to those ones too. So yeah, I do not get that mindset where just I can understand the people that are the never paratus, as I like to say, the people that just they leave their house, and if they've got their house keys, that's they're well prepared, but they may not even have their wallet or their ID, and they are literally prepared for absolutely nothing. I used to see people on the subway wearing flip-flops, and I'm like, what are you doing? What if you need to run or fight? You are not going to be able to do either of those in those stupid things. But again, most days I don't pull my gun on anybody. As a matter of fact, most days are just about all days. And so the idea of having a gun with you, and the idea of, obviously these people live just fine without their knife. I get that. But gosh, going on and just saying why would you ever have a knife on you? Why would you ever carry a flashlight? Why would you carry a tourniquet? Because there's a use for it. And I often turn it on. Why don't you? I remember there was an anti-gun doctor I worked with, and I'm like, don't you have a med kit with sutures and stuff on it? I mean, you're a physician. You of all people know how to can do a lot of good with a med kit. Don't you have one of those in your car? What if you stumble on a car accident? What if your kid, has a nasty fall? And he really got there. I'm like, I carry a gun because it's a tool I'm proficient at, and it has and it's useful. Why would you carry tools you're proficient at? And I'm glad to see this Atlantic article is starting to show some cracks in this homo cabiculus attitude. So moving on to the next topic, unfortunately, there was another shooting This one happened on November 23rd, and it says that they were a manager at a Walmart this is in Virginia.
Chesapeake, Virginia. I believe they were a night manager.
Yep.
And, okay, I have no way to prove this. I don't really think there's a way for anyone to disprove it either. But coming as it did so quickly after the Club Q shooting, I can't state with conviction that this was a copycat, but I can't shake the feeling that this manager, who, by the way, was a piece of crap for committing murder, saw that and just decided, you know what, that's a great idea. I'm going to do that too.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's certainly happened fast. So one of the rare, there's one thing that's a very, very odd about this one that you normally don't see was, I believe, the killer bought his gun that day. This was not an instance where they were planning for months, if not a year ahead of time. Many of these spree killers, it turns out, they spent a lot of time planning and fantasizing about this event. And this is not that case. This person they used a handgun, not a long gun, and they went into the break room of this Walmart and shot a bunch of the employees and then turned the gun on themselves. And I will also note that in a different article, I don't believe I posted it. No, I did not. But there is an article, and I think I left it out intentionally just because it really does focus a lot more on the gunman. But it had the contents of their phone. They essentially left a multi-page. It really wasn't a manifesto, if you will, but essentially talking about the people there and their philosophy of life and that they were, God forgive me for what I'm about to do. But it really did strike me as a very, very psychotic rambling. So I think this person was really struggling with mental illness as well at the time, which does not excuse such behavior, but it doesn't lead me to think that it was directly a copycat. That may have been a spark on this, but I think this was a ticking time bomb. I will note that I was actually talking with my father about this, and he was noting, that they had someone from Walmart said that guns are allowed in Walmart. We just discourage it. And it's one of those, yes, but these were all the victims were Walmart employees, and 110% Walmart corporate policy is, if you bring a firearm, even if you are licensed to carry into Walmart while you are working, while you were working, you'll be terminated. It was very similar to, I used to work at a hospital. And this was a hospital that both I worked at and I have attended for various medical reasons. And when I was wearing my employee badge and I was getting paid, I did not have a gun on me. When I was not getting paid and I was there to see a doctor or to assist somebody who was seeing the doctor, I had a gun on me, and both of those were perfectly fine. Because at this actually, I think pretty much all the hospitals in Massachusetts, you're perfectly legal to carry a gun if you're licensed to carry. But as an employee, you are not. And so this is very clearly another gun-free zone shooting.
I'm not entirely clear on why it's okay for customers to carry, but not employees. If I had to guess, I imagine it has something to do with corporate insurance.
That's what I've always heard. You know what? I should actually, I should send Benjamin Blatt a message to see if he knows anything about this, because that's one of those things that I hear a lot of people say that it's lawyers, and I don't even know if it is necessarily insurance or if it's really just copy paste. is when drafting an employee handbook, a lot of them are just, oh, here's some standard templates. And the standard templates often say no firearms or weapons, as well as no use of intoxicating substance. They catch you smoking a joint on your on your work break, they'll fire you. They catch you popping open a beer in the parking lot before you start your shift. They will fire you.
Maybe they're easily frightened and think that if someone is fired, they will pull out a gun and start shooting out of anger.
Well, I've even heard an instance about in the event that, say, there's a robbery go on instead of the spree killer, because like these are old things. Actually, my father-in-law used to own a liquor store, and he openly said that I'm trying to remember if he had a policy where it was that, but I think he openly discouraged any sort of fighting back from the employees in the event of a robbery. And I believe this liquor store had been robbed at least once while he owned it. But the big statement is that over concern of, in the event that somebody is defending themselves, either the employee getting killed, not being unsuccessful at defending themselves and or the business, or people getting injured in the crossfire. So, but again, this is all apocryphal. So I that might be worthwhile in me doing a little digging and phoning a few friends to see if we can track down the basis of that employee handbook idea. But it's also the big statement on what's the difference between customers and employees is the employees, you could tell them a lot more of what they can do than customers as well. So that is just how the cookie grows. But again, I think there is that liability angle on if somebody is using a firearm while they are under your employ. What if something bad happens? Can you be held liable for it? But speaking of liabilities,
President Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Dum.
That's right. Yeah. He was in Massachusetts and live on camera, he stepped on his wiener. The name quote is somebody asked him about, I believe this was directly after the Club Q shooting, and they asked him how he felt about that, and he said, "The idea we still allow semi-automatic weapons to be purchased is sick. It's just sick. It has no socially redeeming value, zero, none, not a single solitary rationale for it, except for profit of the gun manufacturers." First up, I will start with a big FU to Joe Biden, especially since not only were there men standing around him making sure that he is safe with semi-automatic weapons, but I guarantee there was a full automatic weapon or two in their repertoire. And oddly enough, they did seem to have a rationale and a redeeming value there. And
but that's different.
Yeah, that is different. Yeah. It's very similar to the idea of that person standing at the front of the church with the badge and the patent leather shoes. He's cool. He can have a gun, but not you, even if it's concealed. Yeah. But I mean, the good news is that this really is showing just desperation, because this is not a measured response. This is just an open, partisan, boilerplate response. And because, first up, again, he doesn't mention magazines, or that the proverbial 100-round magazine that always gets bandied around because, 100-round magazine, very few people use 100-round magazines, and there's very few guns that can accept 100-round magazines, but it sounds like a big ridiculous number, and then you turn around and ban magazines that hold 11. So it's a straw man. But in this instance, he is literally saying that you should not be able to purchase a semi-automatic weapon. And just also saying it has no socially redeeming value. So therefore that also, I think it's not too much of a stretch to say that he is also concerned about the ownership of semi-automatic weapons.
I mean, if there is no social redeeming value, then I eagerly await all the police in the nation turning in their semi-auto firearms and going back to 6-shot revolvers.
Mm-hmm. Heck, I remember being on Mike the Gun Guy Weisser's website, who of course is an anti-gun shill here in Massachusetts, and he was again saying there's no reason why a civilian should own an AR-15. To which I responded, then why do you own one? And of course, his response was to block me. Because we don't need to answer those sort of and delete that question.
This is also a good point to once again haul out the soapbox and say that police officers are also civilians.
Mm-hmm.
They like to pretend they aren't, but civilian means not military, and the police aren't the military.
Yep, they are peace officers. And furthermore, I'll go even a step further, is the reason why your regular beat officer, not the SWAT teams, but your regular beat officer has a pistol and almost always a rifle with them. The reason why they have those is for the exact reason why you might have a pistol or a rifle with you. It is not for any sort of tactical, staged up whatever. It is for their personal protection and the protection of the people around them. The only difference between police and us is it's a police's job to go to places where bad stuff is going down and keep the peace, and their duty to retreat or their opportunities to retreat are much less. Yes. Well, should be much less. But yeah, they can do what they want. They can stop for coffee on their way to the crime scene, and they're under no legal obligation to actually do their job. But it might not be good for their career if that's their choice. Mm-hmm. But the whole point is they're not carrying an AR-15 because they're going to stage up against the cartel. They're carrying an AR-15 because if someone decides to do violence to them or to other people, that they can respond with righteous violence. And that's, ta-da, that's the exact reason why I own and carry guns as well. And so this is just tin-eared foolishness. And I really don't, especially with the changing of the House and Senate seats around, and given really how minimal the last gun control law, quote unquote gun control law that got passed, and that this article that I have in the show notes even has him signing that the Bipartisan Safers Community Act into law just as a bookend. This isn't going to amount to anything, especially with him saying, "I'm going to ban. I want to ban all semi-automatic weapons." So, but boy, they sure do hate them. And of course, I will also add that, hey, if you don't like the fact that a Glock can shoot really, really fast, you don't want to see someone who's practiced a lot with a revolver.
Laughs in Jerry Michalek.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, that I would be remiss not to talk about that one.
So, Weer'd, I'm hearing a lot about FTX, and because I live under a rock, I don't know what cryptocurrency is or how it works. Can you tell me more about it?
I can't. As a matter of fact, patrons of the show who listen to the ACP Mag Dump will have noted that I actually put a news story on the FTX scandal, expecting that maybe David or Oddball, who were on the show with me at the time, might know more than me and could help explain it. And they didn't. So we really just kind of left it there. And so, the next step is if you're a really avid follower of the show, you'll remember that early on in the very, very first episodes, we had a regular contributor who talked about cryptocurrency. So I indeed fired off an email to Savage1R and urged him to come out of retirement to talk about this news story. And despite him being halfway around the world visiting family, he stepped up. So thanks, Savage.
Well, hello, children. Gather round. It's time to hear another story from Savage1R. Well, guys, this is going to be an interesting one. Weer'd contacted me earlier this week, and he had some questions about the recent debacle that happened with FTX. And depending on how deep down the rabbit hole you want to go, it keeps getting weirder and weirder and
friggin'
weirder. So let's get on with the story a little bit here. So anyways, Weer'd contacted me because I know a little bit about crypto. And there's this thing called FTX that went bankrupt, and everybody is going bad.
Stuff.
Crazy. They're all saying that Bitcoin and all the cryptos are a giant Ponzi scheme and you should have invested in gold and silver, and we need to regulate all those rogue exchanges and cryptos into oblivion so the average investor can finally be protected from these evil schemers. Mass hysteria, dogs and cats living together, end of the world type stuff, right? Well, not really. First of all, I'll start out by saying that I have written up a fairly comprehensive course that is an introduction to cryptocurrency and how it works, and given the file to Weer'd, so if you want to dive a bit deeper, feel free to contact him or me. But in the interest of time, let me see if I can sum up things as briefly as possible, which, if some of you know me, you know is impossible. Okay, the short version, here we go. Crypto Jesus was actually a Trojan horse who laundered millions through President Zelensky from Ukraine to fund the DNC midterm elections and wrote legislation that would make his exchange a monopoly in the US, but a bigger fish saw what he was up to and knew FTX had no money. So they dumped all their shares in FTX. FTX went out of business, and all the fraudulent information came out on the new free speech Twitter on 24/7 live spaces broadcast featuring all of the most prominent tech bros in the world. Make sense? Well, probably not. Longer version. This is an ongoing story that can't possibly be compressed into anything other than a 20-episode documentary starring Jonah Hill as our hero, in quotes, Sam Bankman-Fried. Sam Bankman-Fried, SBF as we will call him, is a genius-level dude who figured out how to arbitrage Bitcoin during the early days of crypto. Now, arbitrage is when two different exchanges in two different locations are trading a commodity, the same one, but not at the same price. So SBF figured out a way to buy cheap on one exchange and sell high on the other, which is principally what you want to do with any kind of asset. So he wrote a bunch of software bots that would wash, rinse, and repeat these steps until he became a billionaire only a few years later. Now, one would think that this rando came from nowhere, but his father's actually a lawyer specializing in how to create tax havens, and his mother is the head of one of the more prominent Democratic PACs. I don't think we'll go down that rabbit hole, but you can probably guess where it leads. Sam himself went to MIT. He created Alameda Research as a parent company and eventually put his girlfriend, Caroline Ellison, in charge of it. Now, Caroline's father was Sam's mentor at MIT and is also close friends with Gary Gensler, the head of the SEC. Now, Sam endeared himself to Democrats and the media by professing himself to be this charitable, altruistic billionaire who wanted to give away all of his wealth and end all of the corruption and fraudulent activity that has plagued many crypto exchanges and projects. He also liked to present himself as an average Joe who wore t-shirts and a short with a big old fro, messed up hair. He drove a Toyota Tercel to work, and he didn't live in any kind of fancy place. But the truth was the exact opposite, in that not only did he have a $35 million mansion that he and the rest of the leadership staff seemed to be having multiple orgies in their polycule, But I guess that SBF and FTX were some of the worst perpetrators of the pump and dumps, as well as the collapse of many of those crypto projects. Not only that, he used his connections to meet quite often with Gary Gensler and was colluding with him in order to become a monopoly exchange in the United States, as well as writing the legislation that would shape cryptocurrency law and how it's applied in the U.S. moving forward through the Democrats. Sounds kind of crazy, but it gets even worse than that. So the thing with an exchange is it's supposed to take in customer money, and it holds that customer money in accounts, and the exchange is not supposed to touch that customer money. It's supposed to be technically in the custody of the customers while on the exchange. They can trade whatever assets they want and pull those assets off. So here's the rub when it comes to that one. As soon as a customer would transfer their funds into FTX, FTX would transfer all of those funds over to Alameda Research, Sam's hedge fund investment bank playtoy thing, and what would appear on the user interface would be a fake balance that the users would see. They'd see the exact balance that they put in, but it wasn't there anymore. It was in Sam's own personal bank account that he would use to leverage trade 10, 15, 20, 100 times X into these massive trades that would pump and dump cryptos all across the financial arena of crypto. It was just freaking wild. So that breaks a ton of laws in the US and in the Bahamas, which he was based. And there are so many weird tangents that go on as far as whose jurisdiction he lives under, because obviously his father knows quite a bit about tax havens, how to set them up, how to benefit from them, and how to hide money from the government. Freaking crazy, right? It gets even worse than that. So this thing happened not too long ago called the war in Ukraine. And the Democrats, while previously being very anti-war, were suddenly very pro-war. And if anybody was against the war, they were pro-Putin, and they were bad. And you're a bad person if you think that we shouldn't be in a war with Putin. So we need to send billions and billions and billions of dollars over to President Zelensky so he can fight the big bad Russians, which on its face makes sense. However, it's been a blank freaking check. We send money over, it disappears, and nobody knows where it goes because it's all just us to them. Here you go, blank check. Until it becomes cryptocurrency. Now, the interesting thing about the start of the war in Ukraine is that Ukraine had quickly realized that utilizing cryptocurrency, it could receive and transfer funds through crypto faster than they could in the traditional banking system. So, after they had received tens and tens of billions of dollars worth of money from the Biden administration and the U.S. government, for some reason, they decided to invest quite a lot of those billions of dollars directly into FTX. Now, that's an interesting thing. So it goes from the United States over to Ukraine to, quote unquote, help fight the war in Ukraine against Russia. But then that money somehow goes back to the Bahamas as part of an investment, one would think. So it gets even deeper than that, because what happened not too long ago? Well, not too long ago, there was this thing called the midterm elections, where a number of representatives and senators of the Democrats and Republicans go up against each other in the various states, and they try and get ahead. And if you have more people in the House and the Senate in one party versus the other, then you have control and you can get legislation passed. So it's kind of a power play. So what's interesting about that? The interesting thing about that is Sam Bankman-Fried ended up being the second largest donor to the DNC during the midterm elections, next to George Soros, by donating up to and possibly over $40 million to various races throughout the United States. So now we're starting to come full circle. So the money leaves the United States, goes to Ukraine, comes back to the Bahamas, and magically makes its way into the pockets of the DNC campaign funds. Isn't that just amazing? And the reason why we know where all this money comes from is because it's crypto. And people like to think of crypto as this dark, seedy money that nobody can trace. But the thing is, cryptocurrency, by its nature, is a public ledger. That means that anything that happens on any cryptocurrency, except for Monero, you can find it. You can trace it. You can see where every little penny goes. Well, or you can see where every little bit goes as long as it's not on an exchange. Because once it goes into an exchange, and especially if it's FTX, that just
friggin'
disappears. So Sam had been playing this little game for a while, and a number of exchanges and projects had been having concerns and issues because he was basically leverage trading, spending tons and tons and tons of money on advertising, buying, rights, naming rights to football stadiums, all this kind of advertising, and all this money was seemingly coming out of nowhere. That's because he was completely making it up. As, again, like I said, all this money was coming in. He was manufacturing fake money on his exchange, taking all the real cryptocurrency into his own private wallets and playing around with it like a two-bit whore. So once the other exchanges had figured it out, they saw that there was a little bit of fraud going on. The owner of the largest crypto exchange, which is Binance, and the owner is CZ, he looked at what was going on and he felt that there was quite a bit of fraud going on at FTX. So since he was one of the initial investors in FTX, he kind of provided the seed money. He went on Twitter and said that he was going to dump all the shares of FTX. Well, once he did that, everybody else started dumping at the same time. And when people are dumping all of their shares in a particular exchange, they want to get their money out. But the problem is that their money wasn't there. And once people started realizing that their money wasn't there, they started asking questions. They started going into the blockchain explorers. They started seeing where all the money was getting spent, where it was going, who was it going to, why was it going to them. And then that's when it all kind of blew up in Sam's face. Now, it's really interesting because he had been the darling of the DNC, and all these newspapers and media outlets had been gushing over him as this amazing philanthropist, crypto guy, crypto bro from Silicon Valley. He was going to save the world by giving away all of his billions of dollars. When in fact, like I said from the very beginning, it was just the opposite. Now, this thing is currently ongoing, and I could probably go on and on for hours, and people have, and there's a lot of resources that I can provide if anybody's interested. But this is going to have some blowback, let's just say that. And the reason it's going to have some blowback is because of how ironclad cryptocurrency is. Nothing is secret when it's all public. And because it's all public, that means that nobody can hide the ball. You can't go back in time and erase blocks from the blockchain. They exist on the blockchain forever. So the fallout is going to happen, and there's already going to be hearings starting in December and moving on from there. And the people who are going to be under scrutiny are obviously Sam Bankman-Fried, Gary Gensler, the head of the SEC, and probably a number of prominent people in the DNC who had been involved with Sam Bankman-Fried in writing the legislation, the extremely restrictive legislation, let's just say that they had been doing with Sam Bankman-Fried. So while I don't know where this is going to all end up, I know that it is going to be one hell of a show to watch. And one of the best things about it is now that Elon has taken over Twitter, for better or for worse, people can actually talk about things. They can debate. They can get mad. They can scream and yell at each other. But they also have options. People's voices aren't being muted by the extreme left. And I'd like to see where that ends up. All right, this is Savage1R, signing off.
So I didn't really understand most of it. It to me, it could be summarized as someone was doing hinky things with the hinky concept and was inventing money out of nowhere and getting personally enriched by it.
Yes, that is the long, the short of it. I think that there are some finer points that I totally missed, but But yes, he was inventing his own cryptocurrency and kind of double counting on a lot of stuff. So yeah, this was like super duper 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 shady. But I must say that we got to remember that abuse by FTX and SBF is as much of an indictment of cryptocurrency as Enron is to public companies, Bernie Madoff is to traditional currency and market investments, or to gun owners whenever some jackhole does something violent or stupid. Like, this is the work of a sinister and probably sociopathic person doing shady things, and the big difference was just the means of which he was doing his shady things. Because, yeah, mention Bernie Madoff and Enron. They were essentially doing the same thing, just using a different medium.
So last week, Weer'd mentioned the Clockwork Basilisk, and I thought that was a really fantastic name, even though I didn't know anything about it. And if you didn't know anything about it, well, you are in luck, because Ian MacCollum is here to talk about the Clockwork Basilisk.
I am pleased to welcome back to the Assorted Calibers podcast, Ian MacCollum of Forgotten Weapons and, of course, Headstamp Publishing. And we just did an interview with Ian talking about bringing Pistols of the Warlord to publication. And as I'm setting up that interview, I suddenly look over at Forgotten Weapons and, well, look at that, Ian, you're launching another book.
Yes, now that we have Warlords fully fulfilled, all the books are shipped, it is high time to get another book started. And this is one that we've had in the works for a while, and Professor Nicholson, the author, has had in the works for 5+ years, building what is the end-all and be-all on reference works about Elisha Collier and Artemis Wheeler. It is a really cool book about a pretty obscure corner of revolver history.
Yeah, it's actually something I hadn't heard about, and people know I like revolvers. I'm not as big into the super duper old flintlock era stuff as some are, but so the book title is Clockwork Basilisk, and so could you explain both the title and Elijah Collier to everybody? Yeah,
so Clockwork Basilisk is frankly the best title we've come up with yet.
It's awesome. It's awesome. I'll stop you right there and say once everyone hears, when you hear it first, you'd be like, that's an interesting title. But now once you see what it's about, it makes a lot of sense.
So the basilisk is a mythological creature whose gaze will kill you. And the idea of Clockwork Basilisk is that this is a mechanical creature who you don't want to stare down the muzzle of, essentially. And there are, in fact, basilisks engraved on a bunch of the existing Collier revolvers for that exact symbology. And so that was something that we came up with, and we're like, you know what? That makes a really cool, catchy, interesting title.
Oh, I hadn't actually realized that. I won't lie. I'm like super into like old English engravings of basilisks and cockatrices. I have a few pieces with that on them, and I've stumbled on a few like in antique shops, and they always are really, really cool. Just the mixture of reptilian and bird biology that creates these bizarre and grotesque creatures is absolutely fascinating.
Well, you'll get a kick out of it. There's an entire chapter in the book about the symbology of the engravings, the various elements engraved in the Colliers.
So what are these Colliers?
So Artemis Wheeler was an American who developed an early flintlock revolver system, and this was then expanded upon and substantially manufactured, mostly in England, by Elisha Collier, who was a companion of his. And the most substantial, the most influential part of the Collier story were the early prototypes, which were clockwork activated. So they were single action flintlock revolvers, meaning that when you cock the hammer, it's going to rotate the cylinder, prepare the priming pan, and basically make the whole thing ready to fire with just the press of a trigger. And this differs substantially from the other revolvers available up to that time, which were all manually rotated. So we have a history of revolver design dating back to the early 1500s in this book. And they're all manually operated guns. So you would need to prepare the priming pan, manually rotate the cylinder into position, and then you can pull the trigger and fire. And what Collier built was a design where you would actually wind up the cylinder as you're loading it, and you have a clockwork spring in the cylinder mechanism. And so when you cock the hammer, it releases a cylinder lock. The spring then rotates the cylinder one position. Cylinder locks back in place. There is an automatic powder drop magazine or powder drop frizzen built in with the hammer. So when you lower the frizzen, cock the hammer, lower the frizzen, you're actually dumping a small charge of priming powder into the priming pan, and the whole thing's ready to fire. It is a super cool design, and it dates from, well, their first patent was in 1818. So we're predating Colt here by about 20 years. And they built a handful of those. Ultimately, they decided it was too expensive and too complex. And in order to get commercial sales, they actually went back to a manually rotated system, although they kept the magazine frizzen, which is a cool element. And Collier went on to make a couple hundred of these guns as essentially boutique, bespoke pistols in England. They found their way all across the world. This book traces guns as far away as India, England, America, New Zealand, everywhere, literally everywhere. They were cutting edge firearms technology of the time. But Collier himself was he wasn't like a single purpose gun guy. He was a brilliant engineer. He was a brilliant inventor. He had a whole slew of different patents. And after about 10 years, he kind of got bored with guns and moved on to some of the other high tech of the time, specifically steam engines for ships. And, he hadn't had great success with the Collier revolvers. He'd sold a couple hundred, but they never really became popularly successful. Had he been single-minded and dedicated another 10 years, he probably could have put Colt out of business. But as it was, he didn't. He wanders off and starts doing like the jet engine technology of the 1820s and 30s in steamship travel. And that leaves the field open to Colt, who comes in a few decades later and gets a patent for essentially the single action revolver. Collier becomes best known in firearm circles in the 1850s when he is actually called as a witness to two of the patent infringement trials between Colt and some of the various other people who started making revolvers. Colt claiming that these revolvers all infringed on his patent, and these other manufacturers claiming that Colt was not the actual inventor, that there was what you'd call prior art, that someone else had done it first, and thus Colt's patent was invalid. And Collier was called as a witness on the basis of he'd already invented this. So the book covers everything. It's what makes this book great is it covers all the different aspects of the Collier story. It covers the mechanical design, the manufacturing of the guns, which is really cool because it's like half classic British traditional handmade parts and half this newly emerging American system of machinery and efficiency and things not being done just by hand. The guns are 50-50 between those two systems. The artistic elements that we talked about, the development from the early automatic clockwork systems to the manually operated systems, and then there's a third pattern of Collier that comprises a couple different types of percussion Collier revolvers, some converted, some made from scratch, because over the course of Collier manufacture, the percussion cap starts to take over from flintlock as the ideal ignition system. It's a 2-volume book that we're printing on this. The first volume is basically this whole story. And also, of course, I should mention, covers the trials between Colt and others and Collier's involvement in those. I don't want to give away a whole lot of spoilers on what happens, but the second volume is a number of appendices and then also a catalog covering every known surviving Collier revolver. And there's a survival rate of about 30% of these things. And the catalog in the second volume of our book has pictures of each gun, along with some of the details, the provenance of where it is now, if that's something that we can publicize, which often it is. A lot of these are in museum collections, as well as the provenance of what collections it's come from. We have a whole chapter on fakes and reproductions, like I'm losing track of all the cool stuff in the book to talk about.
Well, that's amazing, and so you can go to Kickstarter and pledge to it to go through. And I think you've already met some of your goals, so the risk of getting your money back is now essentially gone. Am I correct?
Yes, we have. As of this morning, this will give away when we recorded this. We have triple funded the project, so it's absolutely happening. This is our fifth book. It's our fourth one on Kickstarter. The first three Kickstarter books have all been delivered to, if I'm not going to be too arrogant about it, rave reviews. Everyone has pretty much loved those first three books, and this one's going to be no different.
I mean, that's amazing. And so, and this one also will have extras like a Pistol of the Warlords, including specifically, I wanted to talk to you about, there's going to be a little, bonus volume, or I'm not sure what the actual term for the smaller book, with Pistols of the Warlords, it was Arming the Dragon. And, what is the other book that is coming with this?
Yeah. So it's called, we've titled it Who Invented the Revolver? And it is a compilation of a couple old historical documents, references. One of them is Sam Colt gave a presentation on revolver history to a Society of Civil Engineers in London in the 1851. I should have double checked that date before we started recording.
Or you can buy the book.
So he gives this talk, which is fascinating because first off, Colt's a brilliant guy. He may have been a charlatan in some aspects. He may not be a guy that you want to get into a competitive business relationship with, but he was absolutely a brilliant engineer and a brilliant businessman. And he knew his revolver history. And he gives this presentation with a bunch of examples of revolvers dating back hundreds of years, conveniently leaving out one or two things, including Collier's work. But the transcript of that presentation and basically the visual aids along with it survive. And so we've reprinted that, and we are combining it with a commentary written by none other than Charles Dickens about Colt's factory in London, which we thought was a really cool primary historical resource.
I mean, that's the part that caught a lot of us by surprise, and I will let you know, patrons of the show, we did an ACP mag dump, and this Kickstarter kicked in, and we got talking a lot about both just the coolness of the Collier revolvers, but also the fact that, like, this is written by Charles Dickens. Like, this is not what we expect when we think of, Great Expectations and David Copperfield and A Christmas Story and or A Christmas Carol and all of that. So tell me more about the Charles Dickens.
It's a lot of these. A lot of authors like this are guys who we know today for their writing, or for their fiction. But a lot of these guys were really polymaths. They were interested in all sorts of different fields, including what is, the modern cutting edge technology of the day. And so for a guy with wide ranging interests like Dickens, taking a tour of Colt's factory in London and getting to see, the American system of manufacturing at work was a really interesting thing. For what it's worth, I do have half a dozen videos coming over the course of this Kickstarter campaign, so over the next 3 to 4 weeks, talking with Professor Nicholson, our book's author, about all sorts of different aspects, including some of that stuff, all different aspects of the book. And I think you guys in particular are going to find a lot of those videos really interesting because Nicholson is super enthusiastic about the subject matter. And he's really quite good on camera. So we sit him down for like 20 minutes at a time to discuss different elements of this story.
Well, I greatly look forward to that. I'm sure it'll be very captivating.
I certainly hope so.
So anything else about this project that I didn't cover on?
As usual, we have standard books, signed books, and collector edition books. We have a Kickstarter exclusive cover color that will only be available through the Kickstarter. And pre-orders as part of the Kickstarter are pretty substantially discounted from what we're going to be charging retail. You're going to get $20 or $30 off depending on what type of book you get compared to our retail post-Kickstarter price. So if you're interested in it, getting it in at the pre-order is definitely the more cost-effective way to do it. Also, it's going to take us, we're estimating delivery at almost a year out just to make sure that we can make it. We don't want to be behind our estimates again. Hopefully we'll get it a little sooner than that, but we can't guarantee it. But at any rate, by the time the book is delivered, you'll have long forgot about the $100 or so that you spent to buy it. And so it'll be like a cool free book in the mail.
I mean, with Pistols of the Warlord, that was absolutely the case with me. Oh,
Right.
yeah, I did order that.
Not my intention, but
Oh, well, we just did a whole interview on that. You don't need to make excuses. Oh, well, thank you so much, Ian. I'm so glad you came on, and I don't need to wish you much luck because everything looks like it's going very, very smoothly with this one, and I look forward to seeing a Clockwork Basilisk.
fantastic. I look forward to getting it into people's hands for sure.
I'm Weer'd, and I like revolvers. Oh, Ian's been posting a bunch of stuff on Forgotten Weapons as well of these things with the author of the book, and it is just, it's so neat. Especially the thing that got me is the ability. What I didn't think about was it's super duper easy comparatively speaking. Obviously it's not that easy. It was a huge step forward to getting so that the cylinders would index, the chambers would index with the barrel and be ready to fire. But also, especially the early ones are flintlock, so you also need to prime the pan, and I didn't quite get exactly how that technology works and all that, but like these guns would actually, as you were cocking the hammer, would actually prime the pan as well, so that it would be ready to fire. It would touch off the round, and then you could cock the hammer a second time and touch off the next chamber.
Just color me surprised that you, Mr. Revolver Nud, actually didn't know about a revolver.
Well, we actually, interestingly enough, David and I were talking this morning, and we were talking about Rock Island Auction has a gun up for auction. They're estimating that it will go between $800,000 and $1.4 million. It is a documented Smith & Wesson Model 3 that belonged to Teddy Roosevelt when he was colonel in the U.S. Army.
Okay, so most of the money is due to the historical provenance.
Correct. Yeah, and the fact that it is highly documented to Teddy Roosevelt, so it is known. It's also we were also noting that it's in 38 long Colt, and it's a Smith & Wesson, and this is from the era when you bought a gun, you bought a box of ammo that had the gun's name on it. So similar to 9mm Luger and why 380 automatic Colt pistol ACP is known as 9mm Browning in Europe, because they were the Browning pistols over in Europe and they were the Colt pistols in the Americas. But this was in 38 long Colt, which we suspect the gun was actually rechambered for Colonel Roosevelt. Probably because that was all the soldiers were being issued revolvers in 38 long Colt. And but again, I was talking to David. I'm like, well, what was the 38 long Colts that they were being issued? Because I have a huge blank spot in like the guns. It really, not until you start getting into the early 20th century is my knowledge very, very strong with revolvers. Otherwise, it's very, very spotty. So no, I'm much more focused in my revolver love than just anything that's got a revolving cylinder. Though I do know about the Pancor Jackass. Honestly speaking, they only made like 2 of them. So the Pancor Jackhammer and the Pancor Jackass. I'm leaving that in. And
if you hadn't laughed, I would have thought you did it deliberately.
And the Striker 12, aka the Street Sweeper. Revolving shotguns. Ian also has a video on where he's shooting the Striker 12, and he's just complaining about what a piece of crap it is. The only reason why that gun has any provenance is because a bunch of obnoxious politicians clutched their pearls and declared it to be scary. And you know who's not scary, Aaron?
Well, I know that you want me to say our patrons, but I mean, we've referred to them as having big swinging dicks, so I don't know. That's kind of frightening to me.
I mean, honestly speaking, they're appendages, and I'm not going to even say their manhood because it's really without gender. They are humongous.
Oh yes, our lady listeners also have big. I can't even finish saying that. It's so absurd. And also, I worry I might insult them. I know one of them will find it hilarious, and I love you, Nissa.
Absolutely,
but I don't want to make the others feel awkward.
Yes, so I will just, to steer us away from the awkwardness, I would like to thank each and every one of our listeners, but a very special thanks to all our supporters on Patreon. To become a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like the hilarious blooper reels, the ACP film tracks, and the ACP mag dump.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends both online and off.
I've got a blog. It's called WeirDWorlds.com, and I'm also on Handgun Radio with Ryan Machad on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at Linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette. All one word.
I love the E.
I know. Try and do it.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
He got enough turkey, and I didn't. Our turkey satisfaction levels are assorted, and so's our podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.